Welcome back to Your Passion, Purpose, and Personal Brand, the podcast where we talk about how to bring more of who you are to the work you do so your business, brand, and life feel very much like you. And today's conversation is for anyone who's ever felt stuck, frustrated, or powerless when it comes to selling. I know I have your attention now, or even running your business. So let's be honest, when it comes to people talking about tactics, tools, and strategy, when it comes to sales and business growth, but it's my guest today that's different. She really knows the mindset is the real lever that moves the needle. Her name is Amy Sulka, and she is a powerhouse, which is why I invited her to be with us today. She transforms small and mid-sized privately owned businesses by helping their sales teams and leaders get real results. She works with companies who are already great at what they do, but maybe feel frustrated that the growth is not quick enough. Her sweet spot? Helping leaders and teams align sales strategy with company vision, cut through excuses, and build businesses that don't require them to live in the weeds. So whether you're a business owner, a sales leader, or just someone tired of spinning your wheels, you're going to want to lean in for this one. So Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Lisa.
All right. And it's that spunkiness you have, that spark you have, that made me reach out to you for an invitation, because you really just tell it like it is. And that's what we need today. In today's world, we need some straight talk. So we're going to lean right into that first question. And what you say is no one is taking our power. We're giving it away. What do you mean by that?
Well, Lisa, as you just mentioned in the introduction, mindset is one of the biggest drivers in whether or not we have success when it comes to selling. And a lot of people, they come to sales training, they want techniques, and techniques are very important, but techniques have the least impact on our business. Now, when I'm working with a client, one of the games I like to play in my workshops is I will ask them, what word comes to mind when I say salesperson? And you can imagine how this exercise goes, right? They're like pushy, annoying, aggressive, manipulative, money hungry, slimy, like all these words, right? And I'll just sit here and count. And then finally, after about 7 or 8 words, they'll kind of fizzle out. And I'll say, okay, what else? What else? And they're like, and so finally, somebody will give me a positive word that sounds like advisor or partner. And that's a mindset shift that people have to make, because, I'll draw that correlation. Every single person in this room is in sales in some capacity. Now, sometimes we don't like to say salesperson that we're in sales. I have people come to me all the time. They're like, I don't do sales. I do business development. I'm like, okay, well, we call it different things, but we're all in sales in some capacity. But yet none of these people that just used all of those ugly words to describe salespeople think of themselves that way, right? They all think of themselves as trusted advisors, as professionals who solve problems for the people that they serve, right? So why is there a disconnect here? It's because of this mindset shift that we need to make, because we've bought into this stereotype about ourselves, and we're giving away our power unconsciously when we accept this idea that we're just another salesperson and that doing prospecting behaviors is pushy. Asking people for a clear future commitment or next step at the end of the process, or asking for the close, is somehow slimy or manipulative. And so that's one of the big ways that we're giving away our power. When we believe that, when we believe those things about ourselves, then we start acting like that, and we start chasing prospects instead of qualifying them. We start trying to prove our value instead of expecting the prospect to prove why they deserve to work with us, right? And so then, it's kind of a domino effect. We start letting them control the process instead of us leading it. So until we start thinking of ourselves as trusted advisors, our prospects never will.
That's a really good point. And I can think about when I first started into my business, and it's been about 8 years, like the thought of sales the same thing. All those words popped up to me. The one that you didn't say, I think you might have said slimy, but you didn't say sleazy. Okay. But no matter what, it was the thought that if I would reach out to someone to ask for the sale, and this is something I've had to overcome, that if their answer was no, it wasn't a no about me. It was a no about the offer. It was a no about it may not have been the right time. It was a no about many, many other things. But when we put the answer that they give into identifying it with our self-worth, no wonder we don't want to put ourselves out there to say, could you please turn me down, right? They're not turning you down. They're turning down the situation or so many things that you're going to unpack. So am I alone in that?
No, you're not. And I think that's probably one of the things we'll get into today is why are salespeople afraid of the no? Why are they scared? Why are they afraid to disqualify an opportunity? And so I think I have a feeling that's one of the things we'll dig into a little bit today.
We certainly will. So when we talk about giving our power away, I've just mentioned one way is maybe not checking in. And I've got a friend who is also in sales, and she calls it follow up Friday, right? Like on Friday, she encourages us to follow up. But the story I start telling myself is, well, they don't want another email, or they don't want to hear from me, or they're too busy, or my price wasn't right. So, what are ways that can you give us some examples of how we may be giving our power away?
Well, one of the biggest ways and it's the nuances, Lisa, that is so surprising to people. But one of the biggest ways that salespeople give their power away is in the words that they use. That diminishes what we call at Sandler equal business stature.
Mm-hmm.
And so let me define real quick what equal business stature means before I go into this explanation. So if you think about like when you go to a doctor's office, right? And they have, the front office person who calls you to confirm your appointment. Think about the language that they're using when they call and they say, Lisa, or you have an appointment scheduled for Tuesday, are you still planning on coming, confirming the appointment? They're not like, hey, Lisa, I just wanted to check in and make sure, like they're not using that kind of wishy-washy soft language. And then when you get to the doctor's office, they're not like, thank you for coming in today. Thank you for your time, right? But we as salespeople, we do those things, right? And so if you go back and you think about the language that they're using, that word just, if that's to the audience here, if that word is in your vocabulary, I would encourage you to take that out of your vocabulary immediately. All right. So what happens is we start saying things like, I'm just following up. I just wanted to check in. I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on this. I just wanted to introduce myself. I just wanted to circle back, and so we've got all of these little phrases. And when you think about it, it diminishes our equal business stature and it conveys a lack of confidence. And there's a subtle apology in that word for reaching out that makes us sound like we don't believe in our own equal business stature. So why should the prospect? And so there's different levels of selling, right? And so at the bottom of that is vendor status. And everybody's always like, how do I get out of the vendor status and get up to that elusive, like either partner or trusted advisor status? Well, these are the things, right? So then there's thanking people for their time, right? And so when we say, thank you for your time, it sounds polite, right? But there's this underlying connotation that your time, prospect, is more valuable than my time. Like they're doing us some kind of a favor, even though they agreed to a meeting to evaluate a potential solution for their problem. So what we should be saying is, I appreciate you making the time. Let's make this valuable for both of us. Or I'm so glad we were both able to find some time to meet today. So, back to the point about the doctor's office, you don't go to the doctor's office and get thanked for your time. So stop doing that.
And I will tell you, when you put that in a LinkedIn post, which if you don't follow Amy Sulka on LinkedIn, you need to. We're going to put that link in the show notes. She's got some really valuable tips in there, but she told the story about thanking people for their time. And I did that. because I wanted to be seen as kind and, gracious. And thank you so much for doing this. But when I shifted to say, I'm so glad we were able to find time to meet, then it totally changed the dynamics of the energy. Just, I'm going to use a word, just only by using that. And yes, that 4-letter word just, on Instagram, when I scroll through and there's an ad, there is this very obnoxious ad that shows up who says, I'm just checking in. Nah, don't do that, right? And it just sticks in my mind. That word just, we use it as an excuse, but our audience hears it in a much different way than what we intended. So I really appreciate that about words.
Yeah, let me give you one more example
Yeah.
too, and I'll have a takeaway in this. But most salespeople go into meetings. This is one more way that they're giving their power away. They go into meetings. I call it bringing JED to the meeting, JED. So if you're trying to justify, educate, or defend, what you're doing is you're trying to prove your value in the information that you give.
Mm-hmm.
Where you prove your value is in the information that you get. The questions that you ask that cause your prospect to think about their situation or their problem in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But most people go in, they want to do their pitch, they want to do their demo, they want to talk about their company history, whatever that is. And they want to just, I call it show up and throw up. So they want to show up and throw up. And they're now the prospect has all this information about you, but we don't have any information about them. And so as we kind of go through today and talk about some of these challenges, one of the things I'm sure we'll get into is how to properly qualify a prospect and what does that mean? So if a prospect leaves and they have a lot of information and you don't, we have just given up not only control of our process, but we've given away our power. The
And
best salespeople don't sell, they diagnose.
yes, and I want to build upon that. When they have all that information from you, what is it likely that they're going to go do with that information, Amy?
When we get into issues where our prospects are shopping our proposal, which
Mm-hmm.
how do we know that they do that? Because who's ever gotten a proposal from one of your competitors? We all have. So we know that they do that. When we're getting into pricing wars, when all of a sudden the prospect comes back and they say things like, well, what if we added this into the scope? And so now you've got scope creep, right? All of these things are happening because we have presented too early in the process. And the prospect now has what they want. And so what do? When the prospect says something like, okay, well, let me just run this up the flagpole and get a final approval. And we say things like, why don't you invite me in for a meeting with the CFO or the spouse or, the business leader, like whoever it is. And I'm sure they'll have some questions and that way I can be there to help answer questions. And we can't figure out why we can't get a meeting with the decision maker. It's because the prospect already has what they want. Right? They have our IP, they have our proposal,
Mm-hmm.
and they're stealing our IP and giving it to our competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, again, I learned that from you. Like that was a big aha for me. And I think, traditionally how we have presented ourselves, whether it's in sales or whether it's in marketing, we want to communicate. These are the features that you're going to get. But if you're really looking about client-centric communication, we have to think, what is it that they want? What is it that they need? And they're looking for benefits. They're looking for what it's like to do business or their life will be like on the other side of doing business with you. So I really appreciate you calling that out. Now, I know you trained a ton of salespeople. What are some of the common excuses that you will hear that keep people stuck? And what's really going on underneath that?
So that's a great question. The three top excuses that I hear, number one, the market is tough right now. So the market's always shifting, but top performers find ways to adapt. Number two, our prices are too high. Well, if you believe that, then your prospect will too.
Mm-hmm.
Price is only an issue when the value isn't clear. And number three, I don't have time to prospect.
Hmm.
Well, that one's self-inflicted. So if you're not making time to fill your pipeline, then you're choosing desperation later, right? So prospecting is hard. Having an empty funnel is hard. Pick your hard, right?
Hmm.
But then you ask, what's really going on beneath that? Well, these excuses keep people stuck because they are shifting the responsibility from themselves to external factors instead of forcing the salesperson to take ownership. Now, we can't control whether or not the prospect is going to say yes. We can't control whether or not they have the budget for our solution. We can't control interest rates. We can't control tariffs. What can we control? We can control our behavior, our mindset, and our technique. And so what that boils down to is, one, are we doing the right behaviors? Two, are we doing enough of the right behaviors? Three, are we doing enough of the right behaviors the right way? So really, are we executing the right behaviors with the right mindset, skill, and consistency? So typically what's going on underneath that, it's a mindset blocker for
Hmm.
the seller. So if you don't believe in your value, why should the prospect? Because I can tell you, people buy in all types of economies.
Hmm.
There's still people buying. They may be buying from your competitor. So if the market is so tough, how do we explain that people are still buying products and services from other providers if they're not buying them from us?
Hmm.
If our prices are too high, how do we explain why prospects are still spending money, even if they're not spending it with us? And then not having time to prospect, that's a mindset issue that could probably have a whole podcast by itself.
Yes. And what I'm hearing in those three things is really the flexibility and resiliency that we have to have in order to adapt. There is no one size fits all way of selling, and there's no one size fits all client or approach. And so we really have to be adaptable.
Yeah, when we teach those three things, we call it the behavior triangle, or the BAT triangle.
Hmm.
And so it stands for behavior, attitude, and technique. And so if you put each one of those things on one side of the triangle, I can't talk today. I always ask people, like, which one of these things do you think that we could take away without the triangle toppling over?
Mm. I would say the T is really what I would think because it's got to be behavior and attitude, right? You've got to keep those.
But people come to sales training and what do they want?
They want the T. They want the
They want the
tactics.
technique. And technique's important. I'm not saying, and we spend a lot of time teaching technique because it is important, but it has the least impact on
Hmm.
the success. It's
Yeah.
really, am I doing the boring thing? Because boring makes money. Am I doing the boring, consistent behaviors? And do I have the right mindset going into it? Am I sabotaging my success with my mindset?
So when you talk about this training, and they're coming, so what is it that people expect when they come to training? Like you were talking about techniques, and maybe you've done this for so long now, Amy, that what do you think are the biggest ahas people get from working with you when they walk away?
Well, I think most people, when they come to me, they're looking to improve something, they're looking to expand, they're looking to reduce. And so typically those things are, revolved around results, revenue, sales behaviors, things like that. But I think the biggest aha moment for them is when they realize that it's not the technique that's going to have the biggest impact. It's the mindset shift that people make, that stuff that's keeping them in that vendor mode, keeping them out of that equal business stature territory. And people are shocked to learn that the mindset has over 50% to do with the success, and that there's little things like the just and the time. And I mean, there's a ton of nuance. I could give you 100 examples that are really sabotaging our success and
Mhm.
keeping us from having that equal business stature.
So when you have these workshops where you work with the client one on one, is it something where you, for instance, if I have a sales call with someone, am I recording that call and you're listening to that? Are we doing role playing? What does that look like working with you?
Yes, 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 all of that. It depends on the client.
Hmm.
I've got different, so I'm industry agnostic. I work with clients in many, many different industries and different account sizes. And so I've got, everything from solopreneurs to multi-million dollar companies that I work with. And so that engagement is going to look different for a business owner who just wants to, learn how to sell insurance, right? Than it will for a multi-million dollar company who's got a large sales team that's got a mix of hunters and farmers, or we call them account managers, and maybe enterprise level sales reps, a couple of sales leaders. And so I will customize it to the client. And so I've got some clients where I come in and I'll do some outside of our scheduled training classes. I'll work with them one-on-one and do some application sessions and some role play scenarios and work individually with them one-on-one with their teams. And if that includes a need to listen to prospecting calls, then I can do that and give them feedback. But there's a ton of role play, AI role play tools on the market right now that can help with that as well. So I would encourage your audience to look into some of those.
Oh, that's interesting. AI is everywhere. Yes, all of that. All right. So you talk about the power of walking away from bad deals. I know a lot of people, when they start out, they're desperate. They'll take anything. But why is it so hard for people to do that? And what are some of the ripple effects when they can't?
Well, speaking of what is something that surprises people when they come to work with me, and that then I teach them, one of the first things that I teach them is to walk away from bad business. That does surprise people. So maybe untrained or amateur salespeople often think that selling is about manipulating outcomes. So it's about pushing, persuading. I'll even throw overcoming objections into that. Really, the only person who can overcome an objection is the buyer, not the seller. But untrained people think that, they'll say things like, well, I don't want to do sales training because I don't want to be pushy. I'm like, well, if you're being pushy, then, I'm going to charge you extra to have to undo that. So, because real professionals are those who are operating at that trusted advisor level. And that's where we're trying to get people to go. So we're undoing those pushy behaviors, right? And we're teaching our people to facilitate a process, not to manipulate the outcome. Right. So if they're so busy trying to manipulate the outcome just to get a deal at any cost, they're doing it wrong. So I think one of the first, when we talk about the power of walking away from bad deals, is just understanding, first and foremost, we're facilitating a process where both sides are qualifying each other. The buyer doesn't just get to qualify us. We are qualifying them too. Now, there's two keys to this. All right. We can't do that effectively if we're emotionally attached to the outcome, which means we have to give the prospect the ability to say no. If we empower the no, you talked earlier about how it changed the energy in the room when you didn't thank them for their time, right?
Right. Yes.
Let me just make this comment real quick. There are some salespeople that think that they have to build a relationship, they have to be liked in order to get somebody to buy from them. That is a myth. Commercial relationships are built on trust and equal business stature. They don't have to like you. I'm not saying it doesn't help. They don't have to like you, but they do have to trust you. Now, if I were to come in at the start of the meeting and say, now, Lisa, one of the outcomes that we may come to at the end of this meeting may be that one of us decides that this isn't a fit. Are you going to be comfortable having that conversation if you decide at any point that this isn't the right fit? Would you feel comfortable just telling me that? And most people are shocked. So there's a pattern interrupt there that, first of all, you don't sound like every other salesperson that's in the marketplace when you say that, but it just elevated the trust because now my prospect doesn't feel like I'm just coming at them to ram a proposal down their throat, right? Now they're trusting that I'm not just going to try and, push this down. But the second thing is we become emotionally attached to the outcome when we don't have enough prospects in the top of the funnel. That's when we become desperate to win every deal, right? So if we're going to be willing to walk away from an unqualified prospect, we have to have those two things. We have to learn to emotionally detach, which that takes a mindset shift. And then we have to have enough stuff in the top of the funnel that we're not desperate for every single thing and we can become choosy. We start making bad decisions when we chase deals that we're never going to close. See, this is the reason people ghost us. When we get think it overs, it's almost always a slow no, right? The prospect just doesn't want to tell us the truth because they don't trust that we're not going to harass them, right? But if we've got that trust, then they'll just tell us the truth and say, you know what, Lisa, I don't think that this is what we're looking for. And if the answer is going to be no, when do you want to know that? Right?
Yeah.
Certainly not after we've wasted 6 months chasing them and leaving phone calls and, doing multiple, trying to get in front of all these decision makers, doing multiple follow-ups and, lots of meetings. So we waste time and energy on people who've already decided, but they just haven't told us no yet. And so we lose leverage by acting like we need the sale more than the prospect needs the solution. So what if we just learned how to qualify the opportunity and empower the prospect to say no so that we can get to the truth? Because that's all a sales conversation is, right? It's just a conversation between two adults to get to the truth, right? Can I help you or not?
Yes. And what I really appreciate about that, Amy, is when you walk into that, letting them know that you're looking, are you a good fit for what I think I can bring? Because, if you think about it, like, I know my process. I know if this is your problem, I know if I can get you to the solution. And I know probably some of the things that will involve that success is you've got to have buy-in. You've got to be able to have follow through. There are some things that are required from you. And if I don't believe that you can bring that to the table, then why would I bring you on as a client where we're both going to struggle? It's going to be just not fun for either of us. So I think by drawing that line in the sand, what it says to the prospect, to your audience, is that I don't have to be on the defense, right? Like, they don't have to be on guard, waiting as if you're going to drop in the DMs of their LinkedIn, right? As soon as you connect with someone, you just wait for that DM to follow where they're pitching you, right? So if you come in with that, we're going to see if it's a good fit, then they can lower their guard and maybe listen to your message a little bit more clearly.
That's exactly right. And one of the first things that we teach at the start of the process, going back to, we have to get that trust and credibility right out of the gate, right? Because if we're going to lead a process, part of that process is being able to ask the right questions to qualify the opportunity. If they don't trust us, they're not going to give us honest answers to those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said desperation puts prospects in control. So maybe break down that cycle for us of what happens when salespeople don't have enough in their pipeline. Like, are there things that you normally see that it's almost like if you were watching it in a movie, the crowd would be screaming out, "Don't do that!" Like, what are those things that we see?
Yeah, absolutely. So when a salesperson is desperate for a sale, it affects everything, including their ability to properly qualify an opportunity. So to qualify effectively, we really need to uncover three things. So the first, is there a real problem or an opportunity here that justifies action? Right? So is it either their pain or a gain, meaning a prospect can't take advantage of an opportunity that's on the horizon if they don't do something different tomorrow than they're doing today? Or is there an urgent problem that needs to be solved either today or fear of one developing? Are they willing and able to spend the time, money, and effort to fix it? Because can a prospect be willing but not able? Sure. Ever tried to sell to somebody who wasn't a decision maker? Can they be able and not willing? Absolutely. So they need to be both willing and able to spend the time, money, and effort to fix the problem. And then, do we understand who else is involved? Do we know how the decision will be made? Do we know where in the organization the decision will be made? So do we really understand their decision-making process? But here's the issue. When we're desperate for the sale, we stop qualifying and we start pitching and we start hoping. So we hear a problem, and then we immediately start pitching solutions instead of fully understanding the impact. Well, it's through those questions that we really establish the value, and people stop short. And so when they have a hard time selling value, it's because they think that the value is being sold through the features and benefits of their solution. But the value is understood when we go all the way down into that pain funnel and we understand what is the impact to the business of doing nothing. And we may find, you know what, if we're 6 months from now and nothing has changed, we've learned to live with it, maybe it's not worth doing something about. But not just what is the impact to the business, what's the personal impact of doing nothing? Are they committed? Because is it important? Yes, but important is different than committed. I think it's important that I lose 10 pounds, but if I'm not, managing my calorie intake, if I'm not going to the gym, if I'm not tracking metrics, then I'm not that committed, right?
Right.
So some of the other problems when we stop qualifying and start hoping, right, and start pitching, we assume that a budget exists and we don't have real conversations about money and what it's going to take to fix the problem. I mean, I know I've been in sales conversations a lot in my career where it's like, yes, we need this. However, we don't have the money.
Yes.
Okay, well, why did we just spend, 3 months and 6 hours worth of meetings discussing this if you didn't have the money? Because we want to avoid tough questions, right? Money concept makes salespeople uncomfortable. So we avoid tough questions about how and when decisions will be made, budgetary restrictions, things like that. And then what happens is we will say something that sounds like, oh, well, we have a cheaper solution, or let's walk back the scope a little bit. What if we just wrote the scope correctly to begin with because we asked the right questions? So when salespeople are so focused on getting to yes, we lose the ability to walk away from a bad deal or to really even recognize when a prospect isn't ready to buy.
I think of the number of times I've met someone and I've been at coffee with them, not thinking it was ever going to even be someone I would potentially do business with. And then the next thing I know, I'm halfway into the coffee and they're asking me questions, and I think, oh my gosh, they're qualifying, like they're trying to decide if they want to work with me. And the difference in that, like, I didn't show up with that energy of, I'm trying to sell you. I'm just having a conversation about what I do. And through telling stories, again, knowing where people are, if they're unaware, problem aware, solution aware, that whole continuum, how you communicate may trigger something in someone who didn't even know that they needed what you had. So I really appreciate that whole piece about desperation and being tied to the sale and the outcome and all of those things. I think that's just really important that we do, because we don't want to show up as a commodity. Like, we want to be that valued, trusted advisor that people will pay more to do business with, will wait in line to do business with. And again, it depends on the situation and time. But no, I really appreciate you saying that. All right, so let's go, maybe pivot for a little bit. We're talking about sales leading to revenue, right? Leading to dollars, but we're all really salespeople. We are selling ideas in our company. We are, as parents, we're salespeople, right? We're trying to gauge and get buy-in from maybe our children or people in our family. So where do we see maybe business owners or we as individuals giving our power in the way, really very much the same way reps do in a sales call?
Thank you for that question, because I also, in addition to my work that I do with teams, doing sales training and sales management training, I do also work with business owners in a business growth advisory capacity, so that they can grow and scale their businesses. And with those particular clients, sales training and sales leadership training is a tool that I'm going to use. But the question was, how are business owners giving their power away in leadership the same way reps do in a sales call, right? And it's the same way that sales reps do. It's by failing to lead. So when business owners don't have a clear vision and mission or a clear process for leadership and accountability and decision making, then the default takes over. So in the same way it happens in sales, if the seller doesn't have a process, then the buyer's process will default, and their process is better than the seller's. When the seller doesn't have one, the same thing happens to business owners, right? The default mode takes over, and when there's no structured process, chaos is what fills the gap. All right, so how are they giving away their power? So when they don't communicate a clear vision or mission, remind me to tell you the story sometime of how I cost a company $7 million in valuation in a sale because they didn't communicate the vision to me. And so here I am, sales leader, cleaning up the pipeline, doing pipeline hygiene, not realizing they were taking all of those reports with the opportunities and feeding them to the company that they were going to sell to.
Oh, wow.
And closed out all the opportunities that weren't going to close. So when we don't communicate to our team, like what the mission and vision is, then people do what they think that they're supposed to do, right? And sometimes that means they're focused on the wrong priorities. In my case, it certainly was. That was not a fun conversation for me, I can tell you. But ultimately, we end up attracting the wrong clients, right? Hiring the wrong employees, just lacking direction. We're working on the wrong stuff. We're being reactive, bouncing from one crisis to the next. So we end up reacting instead of leading. And when they fail to set clear expectations, then we're working in the weeds instead of working on the business, right? So just like a salesperson who spends all their time chasing instead of qualifying to a business, this means that they're spending all of their time handling day-to-day problems and they don't have time to work on the business. So they'll say things like, I'm so busy working in the business, I don't have time to work on the business. And then the company ends up running them instead of them running the company.
Yes. And we've all been in that situation where we look up one day and what am I doing? Right? Like, because we get caught up in that chaos of all of that. I think too, also to go back to a couple of things you said, Amy, is I'm thinking about when we think of mindset, how much our own personal views on money have to do with our ability to talk about money, to talk about budget, to have a sales conversation. How can you help walk people through first to realize what their money mindset, how it might impact their ability to sell and sell well? And then what do they do once they discover it?
It's huge. So and we cover this in the training. So when you think about your house of origin, when you were growing up, what were you taught about money? Did your family have a scarcity mindset when it came to money? Or did they have an abundance mindset when it came to money? And how is that showing up with the product or service or solution that you're selling? And I know for a lot of the sellers that we train, sometimes the products and services that they're selling, they can't afford to buy themselves. So I spent 25 years in the multifamily industry before I bought my Sandler business. It was not unusual for leasing consultants to be showing apartments that they couldn't afford to live in. Right? So when people ask for discounts, here's where this shows up. When people ask for discounts, people sell the way that they like to buy, right? So for someone who's a bargain shopper, and they won't pay full price for anything, what do you think is going to happen in their mindset when somebody asks them for a discount? Or they say, is this your best price? And so when we see things that are happening, like a salesperson is just caving on price and they're giving away margin, and they're not even asking any questions to qualify the question and to understand, well, when you say that it's too much, like I understand that you're asking me for a discount. Are you saying that the monthly fee is too much or the overall agreement is too much?
Mm-hmm.
Are there things that we could do to change the scope or to take some things out? But a lot of times people aren't asking those kinds of questions, and they just get panicked
Mm-hmm.
when somebody says, okay, well, we've narrowed it down to you and one other company, and the other company is 15% cheaper. Can you price match?
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of these things, they're starting from that mindset that they had of what were you taught about money in your house of origin? Like, did you have a scarcity mindset or did you have an abundance mindset? Now, if they had an abundance mindset, maybe they have the other problem. Maybe they're sitting across from someone who does have a scarcity mindset, but they don't know how to ask the right questions
Mm-hmm.
to uncover that or to read the body language and understand that there's a discomfort here that I need to ask some questions about, because to me, money's not a problem. We have plenty of it in my house, right? And so, we don't ever put anything out to bid. If we like it, we get it, right? But, when you're in front of somebody that's got a different money concept than you do, how do we need to adjust for that?
Mm-hmm.
It was a great question. I love the question.
Yeah, well, I'm running into that so much. And a couple episodes ago, we had someone that talked about money mindset. And so I just know that that is almost part of every sales process, no matter what we do in business. The mindset that we bring in money from our family of origin, we have to be aware of that. But also, you don't know what your prospect has, what they're bringing to the table on that. So, I'm glad that you addressed it in the training, and I can see where that's very much needed. So, Amy, if somebody feels stuck right now, what's one step they could take today to start reclaiming their power to maybe get back control of what they've been thinking?
So the first step to breaking free from a powerless cycle, whether it's in sales or if they're running a business, is really understanding what's causing it.
Mm-hmm.
So when people feel stuck, it's because they're reacting instead of leading.
Mm-hmm.
So whether they're leading the sales process or leading their business leadership team, they're reacting. And when they're constantly in reaction mode, it feels like nothing is in their control. Right? So how do we break out of that? So we take back our control in 3 areas. So first we have to fix our mindset. So we have to start thinking like a trusted advisor. We have to start thinking like a leader. So for salespeople, stop thinking like a vendor. You don't need the deal, right? You're qualifying the prospect just as much as they're qualifying you. Just because somebody calls and wants information on your company or your service doesn't mean that they get a demo or a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is to get that mindset right. You have the right to get the information that you need to qualify them as much as they have the right to get the information that they need to qualify you. And if they're not willing to answer your questions or to give you that information, that's a red flag that we may need to disqualify the opportunity. If you're a business owner, stop thinking like an operator. So if your business depends entirely on you, you don't own a business, you own a job.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see yourself as a leader, everything changes. And trusted advisors don't chase business, and great business owners don't let themselves get stuck in the weeds. The second step is to fix the process. All right, so we have to stop letting others control the game. So for salespeople, if the buyer is dictating the next steps, then you've already lost.
Mm-hmm.
So if the answer is going to be no, let's go ahead and find out now rather than 3 months from now. So start running your process, qualify properly, set expectations, control the sales cycle, and get a clear future commitment at the end of every sales call. Mm-hmm. So here's a freebie tip giveaway. Sometimes salespeople think that they're in control of the process when the buyer says something like, hey, I'll reach out to you next week to finalize and wrap things up. If you don't have a confirmed time, date, and place for the next interaction, you just gave up control of your sales process to the buyer and you don't even know that you did it. Stop following up, start getting clear future commitments. Fixing the process for business owners. If you're always solving problems instead of growing the company, then you're stuck in survival mode. And the only way to scale is to implement repeatable systems that don't require your constant involvement. I think most business owners understand, in theory, to be able to do that, we either need to add people or we need to add some structure with some processes. But when they've gotten stuck, adding people requires capital that they may not have. Adding processes requires time that they definitely don't have, right? And that's assuming that they even know how. So that's where we come in and help them is to show them the how. But you have to be willing to get out of working in the business to work on the business to get that change. And then the third thing is to fix the pipeline. So we got to get out of desperation mode. Mm-hmm. So the fastest way to stop chasing bad deals is to have enough good deals in the pipeline. Sales part, art part, science. Science part is calling enough prospects. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, right? So the more opportunities you have, the more you can qualify, disqualify, and choose who you want to work with. But you got to go out and you got to do the prospecting behavior to get that in the pipeline. For the business owners, the business version of pipeline is talent, processes, and strategy. Right? So if you don't have a clear plan for growth, then you're always going to be stuck putting out fires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not a place we want to be. Not if we want to scale up and get some things going. And I think your point is well taken about developing these processes. I know a lot of people think it's going to take too much time to do, but to go back to what you had said originally, what is it costing you? What's at stake if we don't do this? And I think a lot of times people don't think about what's at stake to their bottom line, what's at stake to their health, what's at stake to the future of their company by just taking the time to do it or making the commitment to work with someone like you, Amy. I think, really, that's something well taken. Well taken. One thing, because I do follow you on LinkedIn, I noticed you offer a lot of education, a lot of workshops. So tell me a little bit about, how you set those up and how we might be able to find out about one that you may have coming up. Because I know this episode's going to air for quite a long time, so it's not going to be dated. So if somebody's wondering, how can I work with Amy or what's she got on the burner? How do we find out?
Well, thanks for the question. So I'm typically offering workshops usually once a month. And so I've got some different ones that I'll do based on sales process. I've got one that I do for sales leadership, and I've got one that I do for business owners, but I'm also available for speaking engagements, with paid and free speaking engagements if anybody's out there looking for a speaker. So you can either contact me or visit my website, which we can, I'm assuming, drop the link to my website in the show notes, and there's a calendar online that shows when those are coming up. And of course, if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, then I'm routinely posting on LinkedIn when those workshops are going to be. I also invite anyone who's interested in learning more. Sometimes in between the workshops, I'll let people crash a class. So if you just want to sit in on one of our classes, then you're welcome to reach out to me and we can talk about what that might look like to have you check out one of the classes.
I love that. It's almost like going to college, checking it out. Do I want to go to school here? You're going to let us sit in on a class and experience that.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. All right. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of value that we get by just listening to this, also following you on LinkedIn. And I have seen some of the testimonials from your clients, people I know personally. So it's not just somebody that we've pulled out of air, like I really know these people that just rave about working with you. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me to be on. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, awesome. Well, Amy, she really blends tough love with practical truth. And she reminds us that the real power does come from within us. And a lot of times we forget that. She's helped so many people flip the script on their own limitations. And I know that you are walking away with so much to think about. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because, folks, we're all in sales. We're all in sales, no matter what we're selling. You can find the links to contact Amy in the show notes. And if you're ready to grow your business by owning your power instead of giving it away, you know where to start. You're going to contact Amy. And since it's 2025, you may be interested in cutting through the noise to build that trust that Amy talked about and find the right message in the marketplace. And if that sounds like you, reach out for an introductory next steps to the New You program I offer, or one of my 5 VIP mentorship programs, ranging from launching your side gig, aligning your business by human design, personal branding, or becoming a paid speaker on stage. So until next week, go chase your passion. It will reveal your purpose and help you develop that personal brand of integrity. It's the foundation of who you were designed to be on the way to becoming your legendary self. We'll see you here next week.